All right. It is Wednesday. It's 4:30 p.m. Central Time. Welcome to our office hours here on the Academy. This is where you can learn about Intune, ConfigMgr, various things, cloud and Microsoft infrastructure in general. Today, of course, we have a very special guest. I will reveal the name very, very soon, unless you already see it on the screen. But it is time for our trailer. All right, welcome back, everyone, and a special welcome, of course, to our usual partner in crime here, Andrew Johnson, and a special welcome also to Richard Hicks.
How's it going, everybody?
So glad to have you back, Richard. It's been a few months since last time, but
Thanks for having me.
of course,
Timing couldn't have been better because I'm here to promote our Mastering Always On VPN Infrastructure course.
even
we have
so.
that coming up. We have that coming up in a couple of weeks, actually, and there's still a few spots available if anybody's interested in that. We basically are going to cover everything always on VPN infrastructure, Intune, client management, configuration, certificates, the whole 9 yards. So should be good. To academy.viamonstra.com. I don't know if you can put a link in the thing here if you have that, but or just reach out to us directly. We can.
I'll find a way. I'll
Good
find
deal.
a way.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That was fun you mentioned it, but I mean, certificates can be no trouble with, right? That's always so easy to deal with.
Certificates are not only are they easy, they're fun.
Fun, he says.
I have a saying. I've said this numerous times, but you know, it's what is it? It's always DNS. But when it's not DNS, it's certificates. So,
dang right. Yeah, fun is probably not the word I would.
By the way, I have a collection of links to articles of major, like Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies that have had certificate failures. I think Microsoft has happened to us numerous times, and just recently, Starlink had happened to a little while ago. I have a couple of others. It's a collection that I have. And I keep it because I just want to let people know that certificates aren't necessarily hard, but they aren't easy. And if you don't look after things, they will bite you. And some of the largest entities in the world with all of these resources still fail from time to time. So don't feel bad if you have a certificate outage, you are not alone. It is what it is. But
yeah, I was just checking my Twitter feed earlier, and I saw it's very timely a tweet from Michael Niehaus saying, basically, every time I set up Skep and Endes, I remember how much I despise setting up Skep and Endes. So I was like, yes, speak my language.
And by the way, when I'll need to have a discussion with Mike. He can probably get away without having to use Skep or Endes because PKCS is the recommended alternative to that for most deployment scenarios. There are some corner cases where you must use Endes Skep, but for the broad majority of deployments, you can get away with using PKCS. And the advantage there for those who might be watching that aren't aware of that, PKCS is a simplified method of deploying certificates using Intune. The certificate connector requires no inbound connectivity. It just requires outbound. So it uses the same paradigm as the Azure as the Azure AD Connect, right? So it's just a connector that gets installed on a server, just needs some outbound access, and you're good to go. You don't have to set up the Endes role. You don't have to expose your domain join servers to the public internet. It really is the way to go. And I have found, certainly in my travels, and the bulk of the work that I do would be user and device certificate authentication for VPN, remote access, Wi-Fi, those types of things. Never had a problem with it. What I do understand, and I have never encountered these scenarios, but I've had people tell me this at conferences and online as well, is that there are scenarios in which you can't use PKCS. And I think one of those was kiosk devices where there's not an assigned or a primary user. And so you would have to use NDES-SCEP in those scenarios. But the day that Microsoft introduced support for device certificates with PKCS was probably the last day I ever deployed a production NDES-SCEP deployment. I switched to PKCS, and it works fantastic, and it will make your life a lot easier. So if you haven't gone down that road, I would suggest you consider it. It is it's much easier to install and configure, much easier to support, far less moving parts and complexities. It will make your life a lot easier. Your security folks will love you because it doesn't require any inbound access. So one of the challenges that we face with NDES-SCEP is that it does require it be published to the internet. So a lot of times you'll use Azure Application Proxy to do that. Some customers will just do ACL and NAT. We don't recommend that. You want to use a reverse proxy, but the problem is we can't do any sort of pre-authentication. So we can't, it has to be just anonymous access because this connection is happening prior to the user, being fully vetted, right? So they're in Intune, they're getting a certificate profile. And so we have to allow access from anywhere on the internet, and we can't authenticate them yet. The challenge with that is that the NDES server installs IIS. And I always pose this question at my conferences talks, and I pose it quite rhetorically, is would you feel comfortable exposing a domain controller with IIS to the public internet? Well, the answer is, of course, no. When you install the NDES role on the SCEP server or for SCEP certificates, that server effectively becomes a control plane asset, or in the old tier model, tier 0. So that is effectively a domain controller. And the reason it's a tier 0 or control plane asset is because that server, the NDES-SCEP server, has access to enroll for certificates on behalf of other users on your CA. So it's a registration name or an enrollment authority. And so it has access to a highly privileged and quite risky certificate template. It would be a very, very high value target for an attacker, and exposing it to the internet publicly is bad. 1, 2, it's running IIS. Has there ever been a vulnerability in IIS? Yeah, right. So it's just a really scary situation. So if you're running NDES-SCEP out there, please consider switching to PKCS because it will improve your life dramatically and reduce your security exposure tremendously.
So, Richard, I know you were, before we started today's session, you were excited about a recent update to a little bit of infrastructure.
Correct. So for everybody on the call today, you may have started your Windows 11 deployment using Always On VPN. And the first thing you might have noticed is that your Windows 11 clients don't have the same reliability that your connection reliability that your Windows 10 devices do. Your Windows 10 devices connect, and they just stay connected all day, and everybody's happy. And now you're rolling out the same profiles, by the way, to Windows 11 devices, and all of a sudden your users are complaining they get kicked off 2 or 3 times a day. And they're seeing application errors, they're seeing file transfer, drops, and all sorts of problems. This started probably about right after Windows 11 was first introduced. Customers started complaining to me about it. I was able to replicate this. Several customers opened up support cases, and we were able to get some eyes on it from Microsoft. And they, after a bit of ping-ponging back and forth between Windows and Intune, it was discovered it was indeed an Intune issue, and it was fixed. And I've tested a private fix that was provided to me by a customer, and this was probably 6 to 8 months ago, and it fixed the problem. We're like, great, they're going to release it in like a couple of months, and then they didn't. And then we asked, and they said, oh yeah, it got pushed back another month, and it didn't come out. And we asked again, oh no, now we're pushing it. Oh, now it's going out to next year. Literally, it came out last month, and it was almost a year ago, I think, I tested a private fix for it. So anyway, there's good news and bad news. The good news is that they pushed out this fix, and Windows 11 works for the most part. So the first thing that happened is when I realized that the fix was published, and I said, great, I started doing some testing. Sure enough, my client does the same thing. And basically the problem is, let me back up for a second here. The problem is that with Windows 11, if you do a device sync, if you issue a device sync where it happens on its own, the VPN profile is removed and replaced completely, even if there were no changes. So we expect that if you made changes, that's the way Intune works. If I change some settings, it basically goes out and says, oh, you have some new settings. Let's remove the old profile. We'll install this new one with the new settings. You're good to go. By the way, it just reconnects automatically, so everything's great. And most people won't notice that. And then after that, if there's a device sync and there's no changes, in principle, it's not supposed to remove that profile. But what was happening is it was removing it and replacing it every time. Well, if you're in the middle of an RDP session and your VPN profile just gets removed, boom, you're losing access. So that's how it presented, or at least that was the complaint, was users were getting disconnected. The bottom, the end result or the root cause was the VPN profiles were being removed and replaced without cause. Microsoft eventually fixed it, released that fix last month. And I, again, when I started testing, was noticing that I still had the problem. So I put it out on Twitter and to some of my other friends. I said, the fix, they said they released it. And I talked to some friends in support who said, yes, they're looking at the release note like it's fixed. And so I had some other people testing, like, oh yeah, it works. I'm like, what the heck? Why doesn't it work for me? So after a few days of testing, what we realized is that the fix is there and it works. If you're using the Intune profiles, meaning if you use the Intune UI and selected the VPN device configuration profile and you walked through, essentially it's kind of a wizard-like interface, and all the way down and selected all your stuff and clicked yes and applied it, that works great. I use consistently and most often I use custom XML. And the reason I use custom XML to deploy always on VPN client configuration settings is because the XML gives me more fine-grained control over the device configuration. There are settings that are exposed in custom XML that are not in the Intune UI, and some of them are kind of critical. So I always do XML. So ultimately, what it came down to was, oh, well, if you're using Windows 11 and native Intune device configuration profile, that works. That's fine. That's solved. But if you're using XML, it's still broken. So after a bit of back and forth with some friends in support, somebody had commented from support that, oh, yeah, this is a known issue with custom XML, and it has to do with essentially the profile parsing by Intune. So what happens is Intune pushes a profile down, and I've defined my XML, okay? They will look at that XML, and if it is not in the exact order, that is considered a different profile, so it removes it and replaces it. And it replaces with my profile, which doesn't have the same exact order that they're looking for. So what I ended up having to do was take a look at the XML, basically extract the XML from when Intune pushes it down, and then look at that and go, oh, they put this element in the XML before that one. It literally has to be in the same exact order. It doesn't have to be all the same exact settings, and they don't all have to be there. But if you have settings like, for example, I think I put trusted network detection or registered DNS, for example. I was just looking at one for a customer today. I always put it up at the top. No. When Intune pushes it out, it puts it at the bottom. If I do that, then it likes it and it's happy. So anyway, this was a change from Windows 10 to a Windows 11 because I've been using custom XML for years, never had one stitch of a problem on Windows 11 or Windows 10, excuse me. But when Windows 11 was introduced, that's when this first happened. So something changed in Windows 11, that parsing, that is, I don't want to say broken, but changes the way they are evaluating the profile, whether it's changed. And so now basically what I'm forced to do is push out a profile and then observe how Intune basically puts it on the client, extract that, and then compare and go, oh, well, I need to reorder some of my XML so it's in the exact order that Intune is expecting, so that it won't see it as a change or an update that forces the reconnect. So that being said, if you I recommend using the Intune device configuration profile now as much as possible. And you could certainly do that for the user tunnel. There are some scenarios in which you can't, like there's some settings in the Intune that are not exposed. So you can't disable the class-based default route. You can't use traffic or application filters. There's no support for IPv6 today in Intune natively. So there's a lot of things where you may be forced to use XML, and that's why I use it exclusively, just because that's where I end up most of the time anyway. So just know that this has been fixed in Windows 11 with last month's August's latest cumulative update. But if you are using custom XML, you may still have problems with that. If you are, drop me a note, reach out to me. I'll help you sort it out. It's I don't know if Microsoft is going to address this. And I don't expect they will, simply because, there's a workaround, right? If you just order your XML like they're expecting it, then you get. By the way, if you look at the CSP, there is no order of preference. It doesn't say in the CSP that it must be ordered this way. It's just something I had to reverse engineer, so you'll have to do the same.
So you can write a script that would figure out what order they would like to have it in, take your XML and shuffle things around.
Quite awesome. Possibly, yeah. You could probably automate that for sure. I'm probably just going to open them side by side in Notepad++ and do a compare and see what's out of order and just fix it that way. But yeah, if it becomes a big enough problem, I will certainly invest some time doing that.
I mean, hopefully you don't edit like 35 of those every day. So
right. No, it's probably a couple of weeks, so it's not terrible.
All right. Thank you for the insight.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Good times.
Yeah, I bet. Research is always fun, though. But what about you, Andrew? What have you been up to for the last 7 days?
Yeah, so long weekend, first and foremost. That was important. But I've got a few Microsoft and community announcements that I came across, as well as just a couple of tips and scripts that I came across from the community as well. As if you want to share my screen.
I'll consider it.
All right. Consider it considered.
Yeah.
So first thing I wanted to point out was this post from Microsoft: enhance update management decisions with metadata and insights. This is really cool because there are a couple of new improvements that have come forth through the Graph API, and utilizing the Windows Update for Business deployment service. So there are some additional update types that are now showing up in the API. So it used to be security updates, but now, as we can see here, it now includes monthly non-security updates, out-of-band updates, and kind of shows you what's available to your tenant, basically. And what's really cool about this is the end of this sentence here. Each of these updates are accompanied by additional relevant KB references, CVE information, revision history, and other metadata. So if you've been working with updates for any amount of time, if we scroll down here, I think at the bottom of this article, this points out that what we've had to do for a long time, if you really wanted to get all of the information about an update, is you had to look in several different places to gather all this information. So I haven't played around with this endpoint myself yet. It's brand new, but I'm really excited to see which information I can get from it. But it looks pretty promising. I was excited to see this. Another one I came across from Microsoft was just the what's new in Autopatch for August 2023. There were a couple of things in here that I thought were worth pointing out. One of them is that Microsoft, after listening to some feedback from the customers, has added an Autopatch deployment guide. I think we've seen a lot of good content come out of these deployment guides that they've done over the last couple of years that are posted on the docs website. So I wanted to point that out. More control over pausing and resuming updates in Autopatch. So you can pause or resume for one or many groups, pause or resume an entire ring, view the rings that are going to be affected by what you're doing, and actually resume an update that the service paused for you, which can be nice. Oftentimes the whole point of Autopatch is basically hands off for the most part, but as we've talked about on here a little bit over the last several months, Microsoft has been adding options to give you a little bit more control over that service when needed. There's a new way of easily offboarding a device from Autopatch, which is cool. And I liked this right here, the conflict detection during device registration. So when you're adding new devices to Autopatch, there's a set of readiness checks that happen. And one of the new readiness checks that happen is looking for registry settings that are misconfigured that could cause you to not receive updates. And we've also talked about that a little bit in terms of migrating workloads from the Windows Update workload from ConfigMgr to Intune, for example. There are a couple of solutions that have been posted out there to help report on that, but this is nice when onboarding into Autopatch. If your organization is using that, it's going to do that for you. So that was pretty cool. Damien, who we have, he's had tons of different solutions that we've showcased here on Office Hours because he's always coming out with something really cool. Desktop analytics, if you've used that in the past, we know that is now deprecated and gone. Desktop analytics did give information on applications that were installed on devices. So Damien's posted a solution here now using a set of scripts, Azure Automation, and connecting to Intune in order to gather the discovered app information from Intune and send it over to Log Analytics to help fill that reporting gap. So very cool there. Funny, I think all of these updates are pretty cool, apparently. And then I mentioned a couple of tips and scripts I came across. One is from Matt Zorich, who is a great follow on Twitter, by the way. He posts a lot of KQL queries and little snippets like this right here. Little known KQL fact that you can filter queries down to days of the week and hours of the day. So the example that he provides here is sign-in logs between Saturday at 6 and Sunday at midnight, basically. So his example, you can't see the direct reply here to his tweet, but his example was maybe you want to look at sign-in logs for an admin that are outside of business hours or something like that. But these little KQL tips can be really helpful when you're trying to narrow down information, especially in larger, busier tenants. And last but not least, a PowerShell script that was posted last year from Harm Veenstra. It basically tests to see if the various TCP ports are accessible to all of the Microsoft services. Working with a lot of the Microsoft cloud services these days, there are hundreds or thousands of endpoints that we have to connect to depending on the services that we're using. And this script will help you do some quick checks against those endpoints. And though he released this last year, I just noticed an update from him earlier this week that he updated it to skip wildcard addresses because they were not resolving. So if you're using this script already, there's a little update available for you, and I'm going to start to throw this in my toolbox for troubleshooting. So that was what I had for this week.
All right, excellent. Let me see if I can share my screen here. Give it a moment to think about it. Right now it's black, but there we are. Well, first of all, I promised Richard I would post a link to his training. So here is the link, and we will share it with the links below as we usually do for everything that we present here in office hours. Great stuff, of course. In terms of news, this one I stumbled across that caught my interest. The config refresh option upcoming in development for Intune. And this is a pretty cool site to review every now and then what Microsoft is doing in the future. But you can think of this almost as a DP update, but for cloud stuff. The difference is that it allows you to reapply settings without having to check in again with Intune for the device. And of course, it did not take long until Rudy Ohms, one of the leading authorities on primarily Autopilot, but pretty much anything Intune behind the scenes type of stuff. He put together a really nice blog post, explain a little bit how this works behind the scene, etc. So if you want to learn more about what's really going on when that is happening, this is a good read, absolutely. And also for those of you who haven't read any of Rudy's posts, he does pick a movie title always, and then he changes a word or two for his blog post. I think that's absolutely brilliant. Which project we can discuss whether that is a good or bad movie, but obviously that's where this one came from. Yeah, that was the news that I had. Do we have any questions out there? We'll be happy to answer any question you might have. Since we don't have Richard with us every week, but unfortunately, we could, if you have any always on VPN or certificate or anything related to those areas, those questions, I think that will be brilliant. Time to ask them now, because otherwise me and Andrew is probably gonna I'll refer to Richard on that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm good at many things, but always on VPN is not my forte. I leave that to people who have more talent for that than I have. It's more persistence, even.
It is a
right.
niche area of expertise for sure.
Yeah. All right. We have a question coming in on LinkedIn. It's not entirely always on VPN, but there was a question on software inventory. But that was the entire question. There was a question mark after it. So I think I'm going to need a little bit more detail than that to be able to answer it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can talk software inventory all day, but that's going to be primarily on the ConfigMgr side of things, because Intune and software inventory is limited.
Yeah. And on that note, there was the question just came through. Is using software inventory in ConfigMgr still a bad idea?
Not at all. It has software inventory. It works great. However, software inventory is usually, so put it this way, software inventory in ConfigMgr is not what you think. It's basically a file collection. What you're really looking for is hardware inventory, which in ConfigMgr does software inventory.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ask me about that, how it came to be, but if you want to do software inventory, what most people mean with that, you work with hardware inventory in ConfigMgr. And for that, it's an absolutely great platform. For those of you who don't mind extend Intune just a little bit, our friends over at MS Endpoint Manager has posted several updates to extra inventory that you can use in Intune primarily to upload stuff to log analytics from which you later can run reports and other fun things.
Definitely.
So, but yeah.
Yeah, and there's just a follow-up. Agreed on the file collection. It times out after 4 hours when querying file types.
It's pretty resource intensive, that file collection, and we try to not use it for most of the customers that I work with. We are mostly interested in normal software inventory that we get from hardware inventory. Rare exceptions apply, but we try to. All right. Any other questions?
Oh, there's a follow-up here. Is there a better way via ConfigMgr to inventory files?
I mean, there are no other built-in feature that have that as part of what it does, but we can absolutely do what we do for health checks, where we have additional scheduled tasks running on clients that collect information that we're interested in, primarily to help us troubleshoot ConfigMgr, because it's kind of hard to have ConfigMgr troubleshoot itself if ConfigMgr is broken. It's better to have something else keeping an eye on ConfigMgr that can let me know when something is broken. So that would be kind of your only alternative, I think, there. To have some sort of collector running that grabs the information that you want. I mean, you can still put it in places that ConfigMgr can easily pick it up, like a registry or a WMI class or something. But it's a bit of a limited solution. You can often get it to work. It's just that file collection is just not the greatest implementation for software inventory, in my opinion. All right. Any other questions?
Yep, we just had one pop up on YouTube. Is there a way to have a configuration profile setting to send password notifications to users?
Like a reset password type notification, I'm assuming.
That is what I assumed as well.
I mean, I've seen a few solutions to provide like generic notifications through Intune. Try to come up. Didn't Damien have some of that recently, Andrew?
Yeah, that sounds familiar. And there's another solution that I'm trying to think of. Oh gosh, whose toast notification script do you share often?
Martin Bengtsson.
Yes. That might be able to. Yeah, I think that can do password expirations.
Yeah, the other one I thought of was this one here that we have showcased a few times.
Yes.
Did you have the post to Martin's as well?
It is. I think I have the link, but the page is not loading for me.
All right,
I just dropped it in the chat, though. Could you see if that loads for you?
I certainly can. In all fairness, it's quite a bit from here to Denmark, where Martin lives. That site is not entirely happy
Yeah,
at
same
the moment.
same from here.
Okay.
I wonder what the Wayback Machine thinks about it. This is a site that saved my butt so many times.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Especially when trying to find stuff that used to be on TechNet Gallery. All right,
Right.
it actually did work on Wayback, so I think it's just a temporary glitch. So if I go to Wayback, or the Web Archive, Internet Archive, whatever you call this, and search for the same URL, I go to one of the more recent snapshots in August. So this was the one we were referring to, and this one supports both ConfigMgr and Intune, and scheduled tasks.
Okay.
So yeah, maybe start with that one. That would be a good tip.
Awesome. So a couple of good solutions out there, hopefully.
Yeah.
All right. Got a question here on YouTube. ConfigMgr current branch topic. Any links you can share that shows real world local SQL database versus remote SQL database? Not sure if that's about performance or.
It usually comes down to a design question. The core recommendation is to have SQL local because it's always going to be quicker to access stuff in basically in memory on the own machine than over the network. Plus, that having a local SQL is by far the most tested config manager scenario, and that also means the one that happens to you that works the best. That being said, remote SQL is supported, and I know a lot of customers using remote SQL. And if you want to do any type of high availability these days, remote SQL is going to be a requirement for that part. What I found, though, and we covered this many times here in office hours, is that the high availability features are often so complicated or similar having issues with to work with, so you lose more time from having them than you were supposed to save from not having them. So my recommendation still stands to this day. Use a local SQL server. It works really well. It's really performant. And should your site server go down, restore it.
Yeah,
Practice that a few times, you know what to do. But
as I say, backups are king, huh?
backup is king. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you probably spend less time doing a backup and doing a restore of a backup than you would fighting with the high availability cluster. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've seen that in other workloads too, where it just seems to be, it causes more problems than it solves.
Yeah, but it's like somebody just needed to have that checkbox. Yes, we have it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anything
Awesome.
else out there?
We did have a comment back to inventory from Kurt on YouTube. Hardware inventory will read the software that's installed and listed in programs and features from the registry, so that may help.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you for those
clarification.
comments.
Yeah. All right. Anything else?
It's pretty great stuff so far.
Yeah. Love
as
questions.
usual. Yep.
And what I'm interested in here, and this is fascinating as a kind of an observer here, is there is still these are all config manager questions, right? Not Intune. It's I am assuming, and not being a systems management professional myself and not dealing with this every day, that System Center, or excuse me, this config manager still kind of rules the world, huh?
I wouldn't say that, but it's a very big building
Yeah,
stone at the moment, and
got
have
it.
been for many years.
Yeah,
We actually had this morning, me, Andrew, and Kent Agerlund and Jan Ketil Skanke from Cloudway. We hosted a roundtable
ah,
around just that journey that the
yeah,
organization had to go from
yeah,
on premises to Intune.
yeah.
And I mean, with well over 2/3 of enterprise managed devices being managed by that combination today,
Hmm.
it's a significant platform, and not everyone is. It's going to take a while.
Hmm.
I don't think everyone will ever go. No, let me rephrase that. There will always be organizations who will
Yeah,
rely on an on-premise infrastructure.
100%.
But
Yeah,
the
yeah, I agree.
explosion we've seen the last 2 years, the interest on wanting to connect it with different cloud services,
Hmm.
it's amazing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
In the session this morning, I compared it to how about a decade back or even more, organizations switched from having Exchange Server on
yeah,
premises. Then suddenly everyone had Office
right,
365.
right. Yeah,
It was the same line there, like, no, we're going to keep Exchange. We're going to keep Exchange. Going to keep Exchange. Oh, no, wait a minute. Let's throw it away and do it cloud because it was more reliable
makes
to do it.
sense. Absolutely,
So,
I hear you.
and I mean, I've seen on our Academy as well. We
Yeah,
have obviously we know how many students we have for each type of course,
right.
and
Yeah,
the interest for Intune training right now is about 4 times
wow,
the
good,
other trainings, and that
good to know.
that also gives an indication, right? Where uh,
Hmm. Yeah,
uh,
a lot of the customers that I'm working with who have config manager are just going, are more often using hybrid, right? So they're doing um, shoot, what's the term we're looking for here when they enable
co-management.
the co-management, right? Yeah. So for me, I just need co-management for the device configuration workload. So I just tell them to move that slider, and that's all I need. What you want to do with it after that is up to you. But that gets me where I need to go. So
Yeah, I mean the ultimate goal is obviously for organization who wanted to leave on premises behind or at least use it as little as possible.
hmm.
They typically want to go Azure AD only or Entra AD only, whatever you call it these
Yeah,
days.
yeah.
And for that purpose, it's funny because you need to re-image the device to get to that point.
Oh, you're talking about going from config manager to native Azure AD join then, yeah.
Yes,
There is
yes.
no off ramp there or on ramp, however you look at it, I guess depending on your
No, I
perspective.
mean,
But yeah,
if you would just take a device that have been joined to a legacy Active Directory and just remove it from the domain
yeah.
and have someone manually enroll that device into Azure AD, you will have all sorts of junk on that device that you have no idea where it came from.
Oh wow. Yeah. Interesting.
So that's like F12 reimage. For that, you need
So
to have imaging.
yeah, awesome.
Only available in Config Manager, I should add.
Right.
So you need Config Manager to get away from Config Manager.
Oh, that's
It's beautiful.
nothing like a circular dependency, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, we
getting
have customers who are using Config Manager to deploy devices into Autopilot to enrollment into Intune.
Oh yeah.
All right, done. Then they can decide if they want to keep it or leave it.
That's right.
awesome. Well, we got some good follow ups and questions here while we were chatting
Okay.
over on YouTube. Um, yep, we've got C levels waiting for feature parity between Intune and CM. Kind of goes to your point right there, I think, about imaging, especially. Additionally, parity with all GPOs. Um,
No, good lord,
Probably
no.
not gonna happen, huh?
I hope it won't happen.
Well, they kind of by allowing you to import AMX files, haven't they kind of
Yeah, but we had the
punted on that?
discussion this morning, and
No,
just because there is an option to
of course,
import every possible ADMX template you might have,
yeah.
it doesn't necessarily mean it's a good idea
Of
to
course.
do it.
I hear you loud and clear there. You're preaching to the choir, but it looks like they've kind of given people the option, right? So
They probably got tired of having that as an excuse.
Yep.
Well, and just another follow-up agreement. I know, but I can't convince them, and that's something that we see. Often. We heard a little bit about it this morning as well, Johan. I mean, sometimes management doesn't want to listen.
Well, there's a lot of legacy thinking there. I can't tell you, at least in the workloads that I work with, when I start talking about doing native Azure AD join, and there's an instant pushback. And I said, well, you need to consider how you're going to manage these in Intune, because you could do a lot of stuff there. I mean, there's a lot of stuff exposed. You can do a lot of stuff in custom XML. Obviously, you now have ADMX. So if you have a custom application or a third-party application, whatever. And there's this clinging to the computer account for some reason. Like, well, how can I see? Can Azure Azure AD or Intra ID write these computer objects back into? I'm like, well, one, why? What do you need that for, right? There's nothing that you need that computer account to be able to, for a user to be able to access resources on premises. And, for me specifically speaking, I'm talking about, secure remote access, right? Using any variety of VPN technologies. It's like, we can do single sign-on without the computer object. We don't need a computer account, trust me. And, but yeah, sometimes it's just the old ways, I guess, they're clinging to.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like Ken said this morning, sometimes just bringing in someone from the outside to say this exact same words, just magically hits the spot. And I've seen it myself from my professional career, coming out and basically repeating what they have been saying earlier, and the manager goes, "Oh yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Let's do it." And the people in the room was like, "What?"
Right? And all the admins. That's why all the admins hate consultants. It's like, I've been saying the same thing, and so it's like, I get it, but go with the flow.
It's like, because they have to pay some extra money to have someone come in, suddenly that becomes more, I don't know, valuable. It's odd. I don't get it.
But it happens. It happens for sure.
Yeah. Well, on that topic, roughly, there's another question here from YouTube. What is the best way if the company wants to implement Autopilot with hybrid join?
I don't know. I mean, I usually refer to book an appointment with a dentist for like a solid root canal, because that's less painful.
I was wondering how you were going to respond to that. That was great.
No, but it's just such a painful config. Hybrid itself, it's not bad if you really must have it. It's how you get to it that it's bad when you have to go through Autopilot, because that device is born on the internet, and you're trying to like circle your way back to some sort of on-premises infrastructure. It's just really, really hard to configure. An organization spending months, and not even after spending months, it's still not fully reliable for them,
right?
Because there are so many ifs and buts and moving pieces.
And I can share with you that I have been involved in the always-on VPN implementation projects to support hybrid Azure AD join, and there are all sorts of complications that come up. Technically speaking, it is not difficult to do hybrid Azure AD join and process the first user logon, right? So you have no user profile, you have no cache credentials, you need to talk to a domain controller. And if you're outside of the office, that involves some sort of connectivity, right? And so we do that with the always-on VPN device tunnel. The device tunnel is deployed in the system's context. And if everything goes correctly and it's configured correctly and everything works smoothly, there is a device-based connection that is available to the user pre-logon that provides that domain controller connectivity and supports that first logon. And that's awesome. It is infinitely easier said than done. There are a whole host of things that can prevent that connection from establishing. because of the limitations of the device-based connection. It uses IPv2, which is an IPsec protocol, not always open. So it's not guaranteed to be open on the internet. So you may be behind a restrictive firewall that doesn't even allow that connection. So you're dead in the water. And so there's all sorts of problems. There's licensing problems. The always-on VPN device tunnel does require Enterprise Edition. So if you're deploying hybrid Azure AD join to professional devices, the device connection will not start automatically. You can deploy it. You can deploy the certificate and the profile. It'll sit there. And by the way, if you log in like as a local administrator, you can start that connection, but it will not remain if you log back on and log off and try to log on as another user. So there's no way to even cheat and get it to work. So if you're planning to do step-up upgrade, you have this, again, a circular dependency, right? A catch-22. I need the device to get to enterprise so that I can light this device tunnel and process the first logon. But I need the user to log on and activate and get to Azure AD so that they can do step-up upgrade to Enterprise Edition, because that's part of their license. So you have a catch-22. So I actually have a PowerShell script that with Mike Niehaus, Sandy Zhang, a couple of other folks, John Markham helped me solve this problem for my customer many years ago, where we cheated and we installed the Enterprise KMS key as a part of the process, so that once you install the KMS key, you get to Enterprise instantly, and then this scenario works. The device tunnel connection starts automatically and connects. It introduces its own set of problems in that you now have to get the KMS key off and reinstall the embedded product key, because you have to activate first before you can do step-up upgrade. So you have to go to Enterprise and then back to Pro and then do step-up upgrade to Enterprise. The customer that I did this for after we did the pilot said, this is BS. We're just going native Azure AD join, and they lived happily ever after. So that's the moral of the story for me. Is it's like, you can do this, but let me tell you, it's like pushing your car uphill. It's going to be challenging.
And I think because we'll be coming up on time here shortly, and we've got a few questions, Johan, could we share your post that does have some hybrid join resources if you still do need to move forward with that?
Yeah, I'll be happy to. Long story short on this one is the most important part, I think, is the first section of the post, which is basically a long rant on why you shouldn't. And then there are a set of resources, 5 or 6 different articles I have used over the years that take you through some of these more interesting scenarios that kind of come up. I should probably add Richard's scripts to that list as well somewhere. A bit embarrassed that I didn't already, but I'll do that. How about that?
I'll send you the links, Jan.
There you go. But yeah, that will be the one. That's a good starting point.
Awesome. Great question. I always love the conversations that question spurs. It's always good stuff. All right, so we do have a few more questions here. One with a couple of follow-ups here that came through on YouTube. We have some heavily used PCs with 256 gig SSDs, which filled to 100% with just profiles. One had 44 different users. Windows upgrade breaks with 0% disk. Is it normal to do profile cleanup during an upgrade TS? We would like to drop profiles for former employees and things like that. We would also like to know if it's not unusual to scan profiles and delete caches during that upgrade task sequence.
I mean, having multiple profiles, that many profiles, is almost like a guarantee for the upgrade to break in either way. And it's very common to clean up profiles, not as part of the actual upgrade, but as part of the validation phase of your deployments. To get stuff cleaned out, get rid of junk, that increases the likelihood of success for the actual upgrade. So absolutely, yes, it's done.
All right. Got a question here from John on LinkedIn. Are there any risks, security or otherwise, to using tenant attach with ConfigMgr and Intune?
Not to my knowledge, other than, I mean, technically you open up another admin portal to do config manager stuff through that portal. So if you run the wrong script on the wrong or the device, sure, but it follows the same. If you have those rights in config manager, it's just a different control plane to access that information. So tenant attach itself, I wouldn't say is a big security risk.
Yep. Definitely agreed. Yeah, just to follow up on that local profiles here, follow-up comment. There's a GPO that you can set to do some of the maintenance, of course, if you've got stale profiles, but should be done prior to doing an in-place upgrade, like you mentioned, Johan. So thank you for that follow-up.
Validation phase, yeah.
Yep. What is the, this is a question from YouTube. What is the new way to deploy GPOs to Intune? I'm not sure if that's just the import ADMX feature, maybe? Is how
Because
I'm
you don't
reading
really deploy GPOs to Intune, you can import a backup to get a sort of an idea on how bad you are, or in a bad shape you are, or good shape you are, depending on how you view it. But there is no like deploy GPOs to Intune. Intune works with policies that you deploy to devices there.
All right. And then there is one last one that I see. I think this is the last one that we have at the moment. Getting certs with Intune Cert Connector or Azure AD certs to devices during Autopilot is required for VPN, which is required for on-prem access, right?
Correct.
That was the question. Okay.
Yeah. In addition to the always-on VPN profile, the device tunnel specifically to support hybrid Azure AD join offline, then you would necessarily need the certificate that goes along with that. Not only the device authentication certificate, but you also need to publish the root certificate and any intermediate or subordinate certificates, because the chain has to be valid and trusted. The endpoint has to trust that device as well. So there's a couple of different profiles along with the VPN profile that would be needed to support that.
Awesome.
All right.
Really, really great questions today, and great conversations and follow-ups in the chat as well. Love to see that.
Outstanding.
Yeah, we managed to pretty much fill up the full hour. That's not bad at all.
Good
Not
times.
at all.
Good times.
Yeah, good times. Andrew, Richard, thank you so much for joining.
Hey,
All you out
great
there,
meeting.
Yep.
thank you.
Awesome.
And we will see you guys around for next week.
Look forward to being back again sometime soon. Take care, everybody.
Sounds good. Bye.
Have a great one.